Hello and welcome to a new episode of Paratalk. And on this week, I have someone who's going to make you laugh. I have Kevin from We Should Talk About Ghosts. Kevin, are you there?
I am, and no pressure, eh? We'll try and make you laugh. We need to talk about ghosts as well, but, never mind. We'll get there.
We need to talk about ghosts. My first question is, before I race off and start filling your head with all this wild and wonderful paranormal talk, how did that happen? We need to talk about ghosts. Where did it come from?
So, like yourself, because we just had a little chat before we started recording, I'm a podcast fan initially. So I would listen to everything that was out there going back about maybe 10 years. So Jim Harold and stuff like that, and Micah Hanks and all of the paranormal stuff, really. Just always been a big fan of that sort of genre. And then I got really deeply into a podcast called The Parapod, which you may know.
Yes.
It's done by two comedians, Ian Bolesworth and Barry Dodds. And they just brought a film out, recently anyway.
Yep.
And it was just dead funny. It was like, I'd suggest anyone goes and downloads it now. It's still there on iTunes and Spotify and all that carry on. And it's just hysterical, but it's done in a very good way. It's done like Skeptic Against Believer. And anyway, they had quite a short run because Ian's like, I've since got to know Ian. I've spoke to him a few times and interviewed him for my show and stuff. He's just a very creative person in terms of, he likes to look at a goal and a task and he'll see it through, and then it's dead. No, it's not necessarily dead to him, but he moves on. And after they'd completed the film, he wasn't going to do any more podcasts. And there was a bit of a hole, really. We talked earlier about how hard it can be to find a decent paranormal podcast. And also, something, I work in many flavors of podcasts. So sometimes I'm in the mood for like Howard Hughes, The Unexplained. Or like I've said, I listened to your previous incarnation of the show.
Yeah.
People who are just going to have a conversation about the paranormal. Other times I want a bit of levity in there. I want a bit of humor in there. And other times I just want deadly serious, scare me before I go to bed stories. But that sort of the attempted comedy, and I say attempted comedy on behalf of my show, but the kind of paranormal with a bit of a, we don't really care what we say, let's be a bit stupid, but let's also contain some listener scary ghost stories within there. That was missing when the Parapod went for me. There's a lot of American shows which try and do it, but I've got a very British sense of humor in terms of like, I watch Eddie Izzard, Billy Connolly. They're my comedians. It's not like Kevin Hart or American comedians. And a lot of the American podcasts which attempted like paranormal humor, they were just a little bit too straight and a little bit too like, bro, but did you see that? Oh my God, the boobs on air sort of thing. And I was just like, oh, I'm not finding it funny. So I attempted a very irreverent, off the cuff talk about what you want, but then interject some very serious ghost stories within. So started about 4 years ago, and it's kind of gone, I'd say not necessarily strength to strength, but it's got me on a few other shows. I've been on Chris Jericho's show 3 times, and from that got me, someone listened to that. So the next season of Cursed Films, which is coming out on Shudder, I'm doing a Talking Heads piece to camera for Rosemary's Baby on that. So, it's led to places as well, which is nice. And it's about meeting people like yourself. Do you know what I mean? It's it's a nice hobby, which, touch wood, will become something a little bit more serious going forward.
You touched on an interesting note there regarding the different types of shows that are out there. Mm-hmm. And you can have a show which is super serious, no music, it's just one person and a microphone, and a podcaster that I interviewed a short while ago, Clem he does a podcast, and it's Ghost Tales by the Fireside, and that's kind of what he does. He produces all the music himself. He does the effects himself, and he tells a story. It's only a short episodes, and he only does one once a month, but he really captures his atmosphere, and it really sort of pulls you into that radio show kind of style. And yet there are other podcasts out there which are more funnier, more looser, and they go all over the place. And they could be fun as well. But going to what you're saying about different shows and different styles, I think that it's good to have a lot of variety, but problem is that you don't want to cram too much of the wrong thing into a show that's not really working. Second part of my question is, when did you feel that you had the right kind of mix in your show for it to kind of move forward? Because obviously when you start out with a show, when we started out with my late colleague Gareth, we had a show, we put it together, we did a few episodes, and it was like, is this going to work? And how does it feel? But it was a feel. And did you have the same thing? Did it feel right?
It did, and then I lost it. I mean, so anyone who's going to try and check the show from listening to this now, they'll notice that it looks like it's only 19 episodes long, and it's not. It's about 250 episodes long. It's been going for 4 years. To be perfectly honest, and this sounds like a very egotistical thing to say, it's not. It's based on who I am as a person and feedback that I've received.
Right.
I'm allegedly funnier, better when giving quick or attempted quick reports back to people. Making comments on stuff. And when you're doing that on your own as a one-person show, you kind of just have to do it based on the waffle that's coming out your mouth.
Yeah.
Because you're only replying to yourself. So you need to get into a state of almost, delirium's the wrong word, but you need to get into a state where I don't know what I'm going to say next. And then when I say something, I can react to what I've said. Yeah. And it's a very bizarre state of mind. But that's how it's so the show itself, in terms of the fan base of the show, it's Marmite. The fans who are fans of the show love it. You know, we all know what we're talking about. When I say certain jokes or references, they know it because they've been listening for years. They love the style of the show. They love that it goes off the cuff. There are other people, quite rightly, who will listen to it and go, this isn't for me, don't like it, no structure. But because I tend to waffle quite a bit, last year, towards the back end of the year, around November, it was on like maybe episode 212, and it lost all structure. So it just became, you didn't know when a story was coming. You didn't know when I was going to waffle for 20 minutes about a subject. And some people love that, but it became less and less about the paranormal and more about me. And it was getting a bit egocentrical. And I thought, you know what? This is not why I'm doing this. The show's called We Need to Talk About Ghosts, not we need to listen to me just waffle on. So I paused it and bit by bit over the weeks got rid of those past episodes and just gave it the structure it had at the start. So now I know we've talked about sometimes overstructuring something can be a bit overkill, but it was required. I needed to hem myself in, and I needed to make sure that I was staying true to what people were listening to the show for. You know, if you're looking at a show called We Need to Talk About Ghosts, there's, you know, it's quite nominative. You know what you're going to expect if you download it. So I had to make sure it was structured in a certain way. So even now it's difficult to stick to that structure because there's certain things where I'm thinking, oh, I've got something just coming to me head. I could talk about 5 minutes and definitely get a few laughs off this. And I've got to just think, no, it's not, you know, it doesn't matter. It's not important. It's not what the show's meant to be about. So yeah, it took quite a while. So it's only in answer to your question, sorry for waffling, but in answer to your question, it's literally only the last 6 months. I feel like I finally got it under control, really.
When you are doing a one-man show, and of course, that's what Paratalk is now, predominantly, it's me doing an episode. That's why I'm getting more people involved and having more guests on, because it's a more, I like the dynamic. But when you're doing a single show, talking about paranormal, UFOs, you're relating a story, and you're doing it in a more free-flowing format, you have to kind of think ahead all the time. You're thinking ahead, what am I saying next? Where's that going to take me? How many routes have I got off of that? So I understand where you're going, and it can come back. And when you listen back to it, you think to yourself, all I've done for 20 minutes is talk about myself.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You don't intentionally do it, but you're pulling from yourself. You know, you're thinking, I need to talk about this. How can I? And you listen back and you think, I'm just talking about me. So it's a trap you can fall into. I've fallen into that trap before as well. So it's it's easily done.
Yeah, it is easily done. I think the one thing that I do, which I still stick by, which I've done since the start, is, and sometimes, don't get me wrong, it's tripped me up, as you can imagine, but when someone sends in a story for me to read out, I don't pre-read it. And the reason for that is because I want my reaction at the end to be a genuine one. So if there's something as I'm reading it out that I think, God, that's really eerie how they described that, or that's, that's terrifying, or I don't understand what that part meant, I can have all that. I can save that up as I'm reading it out live, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And say that as genuine, like visceral, emotive questions at the end of the story, as opposed to me pre-reading it, me editing it, me then sitting there and then acting like it's the first time I've heard it. But obviously it has cut me out a few times, especially when either people haven't sent it in the perfect grammar, or it's just not been a very good story. Sometimes I've wasted 6 minutes reading a story out and thought, I'm not even bothering with that.
My next question is, although it's the show is kind of primarily you, it's not only you, is it?
No, I get me partner. I mean, literally, it was against her will at the very start, but I get me partner Becca on. She got no interest in podcasts. She doesn't listen to podcasts. She's a complete skeptic. She's a very rational person. She's an atheist. She's got, at the same time, she's open to, she uses this quote all the time, which is by some famous author or famous philosopher, which is something along the lines of, I believe in magic, but I can state no case of ever seeing it, or something similar like that.
Okay.
And that's the quote that she uses. So she basically means she's never seen anything that would convince her that something is there, be that in religion, be that in spiritualness or the occult or paranormal or anything like this. So now it used to be I'd just get it on and we'd do a show together and we'd have her opinion and then we'd ramble. And going back to what I was saying before, we got to the point when we were furloughed and stuff where we started to do shows called We Don't Need to Talk About Ghosts, where me and her would just talk about everyday stuff. Now, with it being a bit more structured, as I said earlier, I've now given her own segment at the end of the show called Becca's Paranormal Reddit Corner, where I'll literally find a story that's been on Reddit in the last 24 hours. I'll hand her my phone with her on. I'll chase her to wherever she is in the house doing something that she, that's why when the show gets to that point, there's a change in audio quality, and it's because I've chased her down with a handheld recorder because she's got no interest in doing it. She's very polite when she's on the show, and I'll say, read that, tell me what you think about it, and we'll do that at the end of the show. But we always disagree because she just doesn't believe in the paranormal. So
sometimes it's good to have those two different aspects where someone is like, well, I don't know, I don't care, I'm not interested. Yeah. On the other side, someone wants to read more about it. Sometimes that's good because you can find a common middle ground where you both can sort of work around. I mean, I would say when it comes to the paranormal, I've had a number of experiences which I can't explain. I'm not going to say that it was my dead grandma that came back to give me a message, a cryptic clue about something. I don't know. But I did experience something, and you have to go into a place with an open mind, but you also have to go into a place with a little bit of skepticism and saying, I can be tricked, I can misidentify something. So I think sometimes that's a good thing. Okay, so we've established your podcast and how it came about, but what was the motivation? I mean, we go back to our early years. I think that when you're a young child, well, I'm not a young child, but I mean a young whippersnapper, you kind of get a little bit sort of, things like ghosts and scary stuff. I mean, come on, let's be honest with you. When I was at school, mates would come in and go, do you know that house? It's a man that lives in there and he killed himself and he's a ghost in there. And you'd all go up there and try to get into it and think, that's what young kids do. And I think that, did you have a similar thing? Is that kind of what got you started, with TV and that? Did that get you an interest in the paranormal?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it was I can't remember, the earliest thing I remember reading was the Usborne series of books. Mm-hmm. Ghosts, UFOs, monsters, those 3 books really. The library in Huyton, where I'm from in Liverpool, they had a very small paranormal section in the kids' part before I could have an adult card. There were the 3 books that they had. So I remember I remember being infants. So I remember being on the infants playground and starting. So I don't know what age that is now, maybe 6 or younger, 7?
6 or 7, I think. Something like that. I don't know.
And starting at It does, yeah. It's like years. They're all Americanized now, aren't they? It's high school and all this carry on. But anyway, and starting a ghost club in the playground against this giant stone that was in the corner of the playground. And I had convinced everyone that behind this giant stone was a walkway behind. And in that, if you follow that walkway to the end, you'd see a knight. A ghostly night. And I was like, put your ear to the stone, you can hear footsteps, and convinced everyone they could. And we all believed we could at the time. I mean, in reality now, I sometimes go and pick my nephew up from the same playground now. And it just backs onto some woman's house. Do you know what I mean? There's no medieval history in Huyton as far as I'm aware. But yeah, so I think then, and also my mother passed away when I was 16. And she was always, out of the family, like my immediate family, there was only me and her who really had an interest in the paranormal. She was, she had many a ghost story, like where she'd seen a silhouette of a dad, for example. She'd had a premonition of his death, premonition of someone breaking in, which came true. She'd seen the ghost of a mother in a shoe shop. She'd apparently, like, her face had changed into the face of her dead mother at some wedding or something, so much so that my auntie slapped her. Because she said your face has just changed it. So she had a lot of things, like sort of spiritual things going on. And I kind of just carried, like, me and her always talked about it and tried little psychic experiments like psychometry and stuff. And yeah, so I think I just carried on from her, really.
Interesting that you bring that up about people's faces changing. My Leanne, who I do a episode with once a month, she was on a ghost hunt. She'd been on a number of ghost hunts. She was on a ghost hunt, and they were doing a seance around a table in this alleged building that had stuff going on. And she witnessed one of the members of I think it was a friend or a member of the team, Leanne and another friend of hers, they witnessed this person's face literally changing, like completely changing in front of their eyes. And it scared the hell out of her. Very, very scared. I mean, I wouldn't want to witness that. I mean,
no, I wouldn't want to witness that. No,
I've been in places and experienced things, but nothing to that extreme.
I think in my mother's situation as well, it was a very interesting story. I think it was a wedding they were at. She was sat next to my auntie, who was older than my mum. My mother's mother died when my mum was like 2, I think. So she never really knew what she looked like. Well, they had photos and that, but she didn't meet her. Yeah. And they were sat next to each other in a church at a wedding or something. So there was no spooky conversations. It wasn't like we were doing the Ouija board and then. Yeah. They were just sat next to each other in church at a wedding or something. My auntie turned to say something to my mother. My mother turned to look at her. And my auntie just slapped her because she was that terrified. She said, you just literally, that wasn't you. That was me. You turned into my mother.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And they both stood by it, till the day they died, literally.
Moving on from your mum's experiences, have you ever had any strange experiences with regards to the paranormal, ghosts, anything strange that you think that's a bit odd?
Yeah, mine's not necessarily in terms of witnessing. So, I mean, one involves my mother, really, kind of. So, like I was touching on earlier, psychometry experiments, the reading of jewelry and stuff. You'll remember this, Reeves, because we're not too dissimilar in age, but there used to be a magazine supplement occasionally in the News of the World on a Sunday that was Mystic Meg's thing. Within one of them, when I was must have been about 13, so going back, Christ, God knows how many years, 30 odd years. Yeah. There was a psychometry part. Here's how you do it. Grab a piece of jewelry, hold it between these fingers, close your mind, all this carry on. Close your eyes, open your mind, all this. And my mum gave me her wedding ring. And I'd done it. And anyway, long story short, she was like blown away. She was like, you just described where I was on the morning of my wedding. You described the room, which way it was facing, where this mirror was, who was with me, what my dress was like, colour of the walls. And it was brilliant. I was like, oh, so I might be able to do psychometry then. So then at parties and stuff around the age of like 14 to say 17, somebody could pass me a piece of jewelry and I, with some accuracy, would be able to turn around and say, normally it sounds stupid to say, but I'd say, I'll tell you what your carpet's like on your stairs. And I'd be like, very accurate, like yours is red, it's in this pattern, it's this, it's that, the other. Or you've got laminate, stuff like this. And did it for a bit of a laugh. And then my mum passed away and I used to go and talk to a woman who ran an off license at the bottom of the road, mainly because she would sell me vodka at age 17. And nice. And I'd bunk off A-levels and go there, get a bottle of Sunny Delights, quarter bottle of vodka, and that would be my day. And you could smoke in shops back then as well. Yep. So I'd just hang out down there with this lady. And anyway, one day we got to talking about it. And I said, oh, yeah, I can do this. Do you want to know what I said, I can do this thing. I tell you what colour your stairs are. And she went, oh, would you mind reading something for me? She said, it's a watch. I went, yeah, go on. So she goes and gets this watch from the back. And she says, the one thing I will tell you, she said, it always runs slow, this. She said, it runs 5 minutes slow. And if it speeds up to 10 minutes faster, it'll still end up 5 minutes slow. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Go on. Now, normally when someone would pass me a piece of jewellery, and I say would because it's a lot, I can't do this anymore. Can't do it. And I never tried it again for about 10 years after this. Normally when somebody would pass me a piece of jewellery or something, I'd close my eyes. And the way I'd see it would be like a series of coloured images, not like photographs, but similar, like from a third person perspective. Just that would.
So kind of like a mind's eye sort of.
Yeah. Yes. Kind of like best way, I suppose, you know, them kids' toys where you'd put they were like binoculars, but you put them to your eyes and there was pictures in them and you press the next one and it slide across.
Yep.
Like that. That's how it was, but a fuzzier version of that. But anyway, and I'd just say verbatim, like what I was seeing, you know, I'd be like, okay, green hedge, red car, and then they'd piece it together. But when she passed me this watch, first thing it felt icy cold. Secondly, the images were black and white. And they were sharp and jagged and quick. I'd done it ever since I'd done it that first day with my mum. It had never been like that, where it made me feel physically sick. But this meant nothing to me. So I'm saying to her as it's happening, I said, oh, this is weird. And I'm describing this to her. And I'm saying everything what I've just said to you there. And I'm saying, normally it's coloured images. I said, they're quite slow. I said, but this is like sharp, jaggedy. I said, and the next thing that I've seen anyway, in my mind's eye, is that I'm in my dad's house, stood in the hall with the flex from a Hoover, and I'm looking up at the banister. And then, this is happening that quick. Literally, as I'm saying it to you, this is how I'm saying it to her. I said, and then I'm now stood in a clearing, like a forested clearing, and I can see a bus stop through the trees, and over the road from this is a dual carriageway, and over the road from the dual carriageway, there's a big long building and it's got like pillars in the building and it's red brick. I said, and I just feel panicked and horrible and sick. I said, and this watch is making me feel physically sick. Anyway, I then open my eyes and say, and that's everything I can get. And I pass it back and she's crying. Again, long story short, it turns out that this was her brother's watch. And her brother hung himself from a tree in a clearing opposite a dual carriageway behind a bus stop, directly in front of the old newspaper factory in Kirby, which is just a village just down from where I lived. And he'd done it with the flex off a Hoover that he apparently came across in the woods. Or they think it was Hoover, flex, an electrical flex.
Yeah.
And when she was telling me, I just went cold. I always get a shiver when I remember it because it was horrible. It was absolutely a horrible experience. I was just very apologetic. We didn't know what to say. And I kind of just apologized and left. But it bothered me. It really bothered me. And I didn't attempt it since. Funny enough, in me saying this on a recent, might have even been like, because this isn't a plug in any way, shape or form, but it was on a Patreon episode that I'd done recently with Becca, my partner. She suggested that I try it with her, and I hadn't tried it since I was 17. I'm 42, so I said, go and get your stuff, and we tried it. And on one of the things, I was like, okay, keep seeing hedges, a big dog and the word hedges, and passed her it back, and she said, okay. She said, my granddad had a dog called Benson, and it was called Benson after Benson and Hedges cigarettes. And I was like laughing for ages and going, okay, but that's the last time I tried it since. But yeah, that's the first one. I know I'm just banging on now, but that's the first one where I thought there's something there that I can't explain. And I'm kind of a rational guy, although believing all this, I'm kind of rational with it. So the second one, sorry, go on.
I was going to just to jump in there. It's, I'm trying to sort of process all this because that's just totally fascinating. All of those events that you told me, that even if you would put them together and say, well, it kind of is coincidence, there's too many things there to say that that possibly it's some sort of random, you're imagining it. I think that personal objects, the question I wanted to ask regarding a personal object is, when he committed suicide, was he wearing the watch?
No idea. To be honest, I didn't ask. It was literally what I've said to you there is the version that I tell to everyone because it's all I remember.
Yeah.
Knowing who I am as a person, I don't think I would have pressed too much on questions about it. It would have been more of a, God, I'm really sorry. How can I get out of this situation sort of thing.
Fascinating.
So I don't think I would have pressed it for any more detail on it.
you have another
experience?
Yeah,
the other one, again, just on the basis of the question, something paranormal which you just think, that's different, can't explain it. A mate of mine who's a tarmacker was tarmacking in Wales, and he was doing this big old house, which was, this sounds like it's going to be about the house, it's not, which was kind of empty, and he was doing a drive anyway. Within the house, it was all cleared out, but there was a book in one of the bookcases about astral projection. He rung me up and said, "You're into weird stuff, aren't you?" And I was about a similar age, actually. I think I was about 17. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "There's a book here on astral projection. Do you want it? I'll bring it up." I said, "Yeah, go on then." So he brought it to the house, and it was a Llewellyn Press astral projection book. Read through the front page where it's got a list of the chapters. And one of the chapters just said how to do it. And I was like, fair enough, I'll jump to that then. Like, no, every other page, I'll just go right to how to do it.
So you just skip past all the warnings?
Yeah,
and just go straight to leaving the body?
Yeah, exactly, okay. Yeah. So it says, the method it said, there was loads of methods it suggested, but the one that I went with was, it said, look at a clock, close your eyes, visualize the clock as it ticks, open your eyes, make sure it's where you think it is, repeat this until you've got it in sync, and then close your eyes for longer periods until you visualize it correctly. So anyway, I thought, I haven't got a clock. I'm just going to lie on my top bunk bed in a room that I shared with my brother, albeit it's 17 bunk beds. But anyway, and I was on the top bunk and I'm staring at the Artex ceiling. And I thought, I'll just visualize that. I'll close my eyes. I'll open it. And I was doing it like that and I had Sgt. Pepper album on repeat, middle of the afternoon. And anyway, I fell asleep. And then my dad came into the room and went, basically, "Oh, you lazy get up out of bed. You know, it's 3 PM. Why don't you try and get a job," sort of thing.
Yeah. Pay some rent. Pay some rent.
Exactly, yeah. And I remember turning my head and saying to my dad, "All right, I'll come down now." And as in, get out, basically.
Mm.
And he just tutted and walked away. And I tutted back to him, closed my eyes and put my head on the pillow. And like that, in an instant, I was sat up in the bed. And I had long enough to think, am I sat up? I don't remember moving. And getting the sense of the colour green. I know that sounds stupid. The sense of the colour green, or to describe it better, like when you press the face on a calculator and it goes like oil in the road. I felt like that colour. That's the best way I could describe it. I know it sounds stupid. And then as I thought I can still feel me back on the mattress. And then again, like that, like within a second, I was lying back on the mattress. I couldn't move any part of my body. And I slowly got pins and needles all over my body. The weirdest experience, moving very slowly, like the sensation was coming back to my body. I climbed down the bunk bed, ran downstairs and said, "I've just come out my body." My dad doesn't believe in anything like this. So he was just looking at me embarrassed because he had company.
Yeah.
But yeah, that again, genuinely happened. Never been able to do it since. And it happened when I didn't expect it to happen. So it freaked me out. I don't think I slept for like 3 nights because every time I felt like I was about to drop off, I jumped. I thought, is it happening now? But yeah, genuinely happened. To this day, can't explain it.
I have something similar to relay to you. And I have told this story before, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit because the listeners will be going, "Oh, he's going to go on one again." Here we go. When I was a teenager, I used to sleepwalk to the point where my mum would take me to the doctors because she thought I was something going on in my head. And I would have night terrors and stuff. What it was, I don't know. But one of the aspects of me having disturbed nights was I would sleepwalk and I would have the feeling of moving, so being aware that I was moving but not in control of my body. I would feel that I was surrounded in a bubble of colours, all different colours around me. But one of the main aspects of it, when I knew it was going to happen, is I started to hear a clock ticking, and the clock would get louder and louder, and then I would be aware that I was in motion, but not actually physically walking about. No, I wouldn't be aware that I'd got out of bed. I'd just be somewhere in the house, and I would have all these colours in my vision, and then it would all just go like blank.
Wow. And
my mum she would hear me moving around the house, and she would get up, and I would be downstairs looking through the kitchen drawers, and she would call my name, and I would turn around and walk back upstairs. I'm not awake. I'm asleep. But but I'm awake. I'm awake. I'm asleep, but I'm awake, but I'm asleep.
Yeah.
Was I experiencing my own sleepwalking stroke paralysis by being
conscious of it?
Conscious, or was it some other mental thing that was going on, part of a night? Because I used to have these night terrors where I would wake up in my room. I never used to sleep with my curtains drawn, and the light would come through the window. And I had quite a large room at the time. I had a wardrobe in the corner of the room, and at night I would wake up sometimes, not every night. I would wake up and I would look to the corner of the room, and I would just see this black shape in the corner of the room, like 7 foot tall thing, and no features, just a shape of a figure, and it was motionless in the corner of the room. But the longer I looked at it, the more terrified I became, and I wanted to shout or scream, but I just could not move. I couldn't move my body or anything, and it got to a point where I didn't want to go to sleep. I would stay up, or I'd ask my mum to leave the landing light on so that light would come in the room and illuminate my room, because I felt that this was a kind of a safety net. And of course, as things went on, and you get older, went to the doctors and they said it was stress because I'd had a major operation a few months previous, and it was just some form of stress. And of course, when you do go through stress, and when anyone goes through stress, and this is the next thing I'm going to ask you, is when you go through a stressful period in your life, I think the paranormal, you can experience what you would call paranormal phenomenon. I remember having a slightly stressful time in the last 10 years where I was sleeping, or I was napping on my bed, and I woke, and it was the only time that I'd experienced paralysis since being a child, experiencing it so intensely, where I felt that there was someone with their knees in my back, and I could feel hands around my wrist holding me down.
Christ.
So I could feel that someone was leaning on me, and I felt to myself, I'm in some sort of paralysis. I need to relax. And as I acknowledged it and relaxed, it just faded away, and I was able to move. But it was really, really scary when it happened, because it physically felt like a really massive bloke was kneeling on me, like pushing himself down on me, or a person. Yeah. But it just massive hands, massive Hulk hands, you know.
Wow.
But yeah, so have you ever gone through? Do you sort of find a connection with stress and weirdness?
You know what? I'll have to be honest and say no, not personally, but I do believe it's a thing.
Yeah,
I do believe that an emotive state. I should say, it doesn't have to just be stress. I think any sort of emotional scrambling, I think, can either, and I don't know, again, both just theorizing, but can either, one, make you more in tune to the paranormal because it kind of it shakes those walls of rationality that you build up as an adult that stop you from seeing things, I think. Or two, it could be that there are these sentient entities around that feed off that stress or that energy, and therefore that makes them more potent. So you, like a radio receiver getting a stronger signal, you become more aware of them, or they become more aware of you. I don't know, but I do think there's a link.
Haunted houses. I've been fortunate enough to be in a few, and I've been fortunate enough to had experiences. Have you ever been in a haunted house, or would it be something that you would want to do in your paranormal adventure?
Interestingly, I've been in a house which is purported to be haunted. We've done a ghost hunt in the former Liverpool Girls' School, which is opposite like where Paul McCartney and John Lennon and that went to school, literally over the road. It was the girls' section of the boys' side, if you will. So we'd done a ghost hunt in there with about 20 other people. It was very eerie. It's an old, like, stately home, so it's going to be eerie. But in truth, the flat that I'm recording this in now is, I think, it has, and this is the interesting thing. Would I say that it's haunted? No. Would I say there's some sort of strange visitation that takes place now and again over a period of weeks? Yes. Every so often there's just a spell of activity, which Becca's witnessed. Becca's my skeptical partner, doesn't believe in it. We've seen, for example, like the cat toys, a laser pen. We've seen those red lights on the stairs. There's no windows on the stairs, but we've seen those red lights on the stairs shooting around the stairs. We've both the biggest one we've seen, like for example, the lid of the swing bin moves every so many months. It'll go through a period of flicking on its own, and we both look at each other.
Where is the bin located?
Towards the kitchen. Now, this is the interesting thing. It's an open plan living room and kitchen area. The bin's by the kitchen, but it's all around the kitchen. But there's many a time, at least once a week, we pause the television or Netflix or whatever and listen to noises coming from the kitchen. She says it's pipes or whichever else, but there has been one occasion where we've both been stood in the kitchen. I had my back to the sink. She was looking at me talking away, but I'm cutting up whatever, talking away. And her eyes go wide, and then I hear the tap running behind me. And I turn around, and as I turn around, I catch it still moving up. And basically, the lever of the tap is you have to lift it up to turn the tap on, was moving up. And the tap...
Oh, it's like one of those ones you get in hospitals where they can move it up with their elbow, like the surgeons move up. One of those.
It is, but it's smaller. So you can only do it with your hand. But yeah, it's the same principle. Right. And I saw it move up. So this tap has literally just turned itself on. So she put it down to water pressure. I'm like, water pressure may make a tap leak. It won't physically move a lever of a tap. That needs to go up to turn on. For me, this was the interesting part, I thought. For me, I was made up initially. I was like, there you go. That's your proof. You've got now undeniable proof that something physical has took place in this flat. It's haunted. Ghosts exist. Made up is right. That was my mentality for about an hour. And then it dawned on me, what am I happy for? Because if that's genuine and that's just taking place, there's something in this flat that has the ability to move things around without any say-so or authority from me. What else can it do? And I genuinely got a shiver down my spine and a fear that I need to think more rationally on this and start hoping that it is just water pressure, because the alternative is too petrifying to go with.
How old is the property?
Well, this is another thing. It's not that old. It's a new build block of flats. However, it's part of an old paraffin factory that was here, obviously, when they were producing paraffin pre-war. So some of the features of the building outside, there's got like arches in from when it used to be this paraffin factory. And also, interestingly, the building just to the left, literally across the road from where I'm looking now, was a former church. It was called St. Nick's. The graveyard spilled out across where all this was before it was a paraffin factory. So the church is still in some paintings of the area, because it's bang city centre Liverpool, and obviously Liverpool's it's been a city since the 1200s. So
a lot of history there.
Yeah. So there's stuff about, definitely, but we've had for example, we've both paused the TV and heard someone coming up and down the stairs. It's a duplex flat. We've recently, I refer to it as the neighbour's cat, because we're not allowed a cat in the flat, so it's the neighbour's cat, if that makes sense to everyone between the lines. Occasionally, of a night, there's been a good few occasions where we've had scratching on the walls and the stairs and the carpet of the stairs, and we've both went, "Oi!" shouted at the neighbour's cat, and the neighbour's cat's then lifted her head up from the bottom of the bed, and we've been like, "Oh God, what is that?" So I don't know, but it's not here all the time. Is the strange thing.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're being watched?
Only very, very rarely, if I'm being honest. We've been here about 8 years now, and I could count on one hand that the feelings that I've been watched. But when I have, I've been not convinced of being watched. I've been convinced Becca's in the room with me. In fact, the other day it happened to her. She was our bedrooms are downstairs, the living room's upstairs. About 11 o'clock at night, she shouted up from downstairs, "Was you just in the bedroom?" And I went, "No, why?" And she went, "Do you promise?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" She was like, "I could have swore you've just been in the bedroom." And it's interesting when she does it, because she will go to the rational every time over something bizarre. Yeah. But when I felt like I've been watched, I've not thought, "Oh, this is weird, I feel like I'm being watched." I've genuinely thought Becca's behind me, and I've turned around and she's not been.
So one of the theories that I kind of subscribe to is, with rather than buildings, it's the environment, the space in which we live and we do whatever we do, that we imprint, and whatever goes on there can be left. So you could build an old-fashioned building and it gets knocked down. You build a new building, and yet the environment that those two buildings kind of are within, the bubble, everything that has happened is still there, and it's still able to interact, or in some way, if you're an individual that has an ability to feel or experience, I think it's in a way like a switch.
Yeah.
then you're able to sort of kind of pick up on that. One of the things I've noticed, I live in once again, I'll keep it really short because I'll start waffling.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you this to put in context of what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah.
I live in an 18th century, what used to be in the Victorian days, it used to be a mansion.
Oh.
It's not a mansion anymore. Well, it is. It still is a mansion, but it's all apartments. So they chopped it all up and made apartments, and they built onto it. So some of the building has been extended, so it's more modern, and some of it is older. But I'm quite lucky because I live in part old and part new.
Yeah.
My bedroom and the back part that's the old part, the part that dates back to the 18th century.
Right.
I have these double windows and these steps that lead down to the double windows and railings.
Mm.
And you would think, well, why is double windows, bedroom windows? Because it's a semi-basement apartment.
Yeah.
Why would I have steps? Well, those windows never used to be there in the olden days because they were doors. And of course, if you do a little bit of research, a lot of these buildings which are 3 or 4 floors high, which this one is, it's got a huge tower out the front and stuff.
Yeah.
They're servants' quarters and they're kitchens.
Right, yeah.
So in the olden days, those where I sleep was most probably a scullery or a kitchen or maybe the servants and that you live in the attic, but it was some sort of working area.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I'm in bed at night and I'm just chilling on the laptop or I'm reading a book or whatever, I always get the feeling to look over towards the window. It's a bay window with big curtains, and I always get the feeling to sort of look there as if I need to look there, as if I'm going to see something. It's a very strange feeling. It's not scary. It's just a feeling that I need to look there. And I think in some way, not to do with, although I have had an experience in here, which I can't explain, but I do feel that in some way, possibly my subconscious is interacting with the environment. And if that doorway that used to be there was an incredibly busy place where people coming in and out, maybe I'm picking up on that. Maybe some way my subconscious is picking up on that.
Yeah, I could believe that, yeah.
And talking about I'm going to be really quick now because people will be getting angry. When I first moved in here, quite a number of years ago now, but when I first moved in, it was a bit of, I was moving all my stuff in. I've got this kind of double door where there's an outer door and an inner door. Both doors were open because I was in the process of moving stuff in. I was carrying some boxes and I've got this kind of galley long hallway which goes between the front part of my apartment and the back part. It sort of intersects. It runs parallel to my kind of galley kitchen.
Yeah.
And for a quick moment, I felt as if a cat had run between my legs. I physically felt like a furry cat had gone between my legs. I was wearing shorts. I was moving in the summer, so I was wearing shorts and, And I thought, oh, God, cat, I don't want it in here. I thought maybe the person before had a cat or somebody was fed a cat,
Yeah.
And I thought, great, I'm going to have to go and look for it. And I tell you what, I looked everywhere. I couldn't find no cat.
Wow.
So, and nothing ran back out because I closed the door because I thought I better close the door because it's just to make sure what it is.
Yeah.
Who knows? But I physically felt something run between my legs and it was really weird.
That is very strange.
Yeah, bit weird. So I do think that as we're going back to your apartment, I do think that because your apartment is in an area where it possibly has been other history there. Maybe there is some crossover, something that is there, and maybe that's to do with a lot of hauntings. And it leads me nicely onto my next question or my next topic.
Okay.
With a property, does a property have a ghost to be haunted? Do properties? I mean, for example, if you go to a house and somebody says, "Oh, it's a haunted house," then immediately you're going to think, well, clearly it's got a ghost. And if somebody says, "Oh yeah, my house has got a ghost," then you think, "Oh, clearly it's haunted." Do the two things need to be present at the same time for a paranormal phenomenon to happen? What do you think?
I don't think they need to be present for paranormal phenomena to happen. No, because a theory that I've always thought about. I've always thought it interesting that when you hear, if you ask somebody, like you go to a new job or wherever, you say, "Do you know any ghost stories?" The number of like colloquial ghost stories that you hear where they begin with we were telling ghost stories or we were in a haunted house or we were doing a Ouija board I think what we would refer to as paranormal activity in those situations, I think there's a lot to be said about a group of humans, like real alive humans, in what they perceive as a terrifying situation and getting each other's psyche worked up into some sort of foliage of energy. And I think that it's more likely in those situations that you could be anywhere. If you believe somewhere's haunted, well, my mum always used to say, if you want to see a ghost, you'll see a ghost. And she meant by that is, even if there's one there or not, you'll convince yourself you have. But I think, for example, there's an argument to be made about some sort of energy that we don't know that exists as of yet. But let's say you got 5 people doing a Ouija board in an alleged haunted attic. Because it's often that you'll hear a story, let's say for Ouija board's sake, that we were doing the Ouija board and the glass shot off from our hands, or it went to yes and then a clock flew across the room from the mantelpiece or something similar. And I think what actually could happen in those situations, if you've got 5 very terrified individuals, if you picture in your mind, you might have a way of thinking of it. This is how I think about it. You've got 2 levels. You've got one side on the left, which is what you know can happen. And on the right, what you think might be able to happen. And 99.9% of the day, those 2 are level and therefore things happen. And what I mean by that is, you know you can open that door with your hand. You think you can open the door. It's level. You reach out, you open the door with a hand. Stuff like what you know can happen in terms of the paranormal, it's always very low. It's like, I don't know for a fact that ghosts exist. I don't know for a fact poltergeist activity can happen. But what I think can happen is quite high. Like it could happen. Yeah, I do believe in those sorts of things. So they never meet. When you're in those situations where you're doing the Ouija board or you're doing a seance, you start to hear stories in those environments when you're telling each other ghost stories, which brings what you know can happen a little bit higher and start to meet what you think can happen. And you're like, what, really? That really happened? Well, I trust you. So what you know as fact can happen starts to creep up to the level of where it meets what you think can happen. And when that does, and it clicks and everybody has that same click at the same time, maybe, for example, when the planchette goes to yes, and that's the final click, I think there's some sort of energy release at that point that maybe just fires out and fires something off a mantelpiece and validates everything that you've been told. So I think there's an energy within human beings that we've just not yet managed to understand or tap that is, by its very understanding, a supernatural experience. But I think it could be a very natural one.
I think that when you're younger, when you're a child, a lot of the poltergeist phenomenon is surrounded around younger children.
Yeah.
When you go to houses and it usually lasts for about around a year, and it's kind of grows in intensity. It gets really kind of crazy, and then it just stops.
Yeah.
I think there's something with children that when you're a younger person, maybe it's your worldview, maybe all the crazy stuff in the world you're not aware of yet, and your mind is clearer, and you're in this kind of little kind of child bubble where only the things that matter to you matter, and all the other stuff isn't important. So I think that there is a possibility where when we're younger, have more of an ability to be in contact with whatever it might be, the paranormal, the supernatural. But when you get older, most people, 99% of people, lose that ability, or the intuition that we feel, it's a gut feeling, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's more like, a lot of people ignore it. Be honest with you, the older I get, the more I trust my gut feeling. And 9 times out of 10, it's correct.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was very arrogant. I was like, I know it all. And I would like, you get a gut feeling about, no, ignore that. I know better.
Yeah.
And it usually goes wrong. What I was going to ask you, going on from this, which leads me on nicely, is regarding the paranormal and regarding phenomenon and things happening, is it plausible to think that the paranormal, the supernatural, ghosts, hauntings, strange phenomenon is a side effect of us human beings, our consciousness? Because obviously we go back to the consciousness, we're connected to a hive consciousness, that our consciousness is outside the mind, that we are a kind of we're not actually in our bodies, we're outside of our bodies, but we're all connected in some way. and that maybe the paranormal phenomenon, not all of it, not all of it, because we don't really know enough about it, but at least some of it is a product, as you just said, of a kind of a wish fulfillment, a manifestation of our wants and needs and hopes.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I could even take it a step further, really, and it's a controversial thing to say, but I've often thought as a theory that the same with religion. So I'm, by denomination of my family's choosing, I'm Roman Catholic, a very lax Roman Catholic, non-practicing Roman Catholic, but I still, I don't say I'm an atheist. I do believe there's a God, and I'm in the camp of Roman Catholicism. But I also think it's just as likely that using the idea of tulpas and thought forms, that you've concentrated on coming into life and into being.
Yeah.
If you think about it, say Catholicism, for example, there's billions of Catholics across the globe. A lot of them are obviously a lot more devout than I, and they spend a lot of time praying to something that a lot of atheists obviously don't believe exists. Now, if you look at it from a tulpa standpoint, I think there's an argument to be made that when they had the Council of Nicaea and all that, and they agreed on Christ's divinity, there's an argument to be made, if a very abstract argument, of course, that there was no God, but thousands and millennia of years of praying to the thing in the sky has created a God by the very same method. So God is a giant tulpa, really. But then that same would apply for the devil. So maybe off the same merit, what you're saying, we bring these things into existence. There's part of me which does believe that there is now a God. You can, and that way you can kind of appease the arguments of atheists to a point where they're like, there is no God. They're like, no, there wasn't. You're quite right. But we've now created it in our own image. The irony, God created man in his own image. Well, no, man's just created God in his own image, and he's a giant tulpa, or she's a giant tulpa, or they're a giant tulpa,
Religion has always fascinated me. Someone who is like you, I expect that you grew up in your early years going to Sunday school and learning the stories of the Bible and having it all told to you. And I used to really enjoy going to Sunday school and doing all the things you do at Sunday school and going on camp and stuff like that. And as I got older, I kind of questioned religion. I was still in a church club, and we'd go and do activities and stuff. And I enjoyed that side of it. And it was all very a positive thing. It was all very positive. For me, it was positive. I was doing stuff. I was going out with my friends. We were going on trips. It was all very positive.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say it was religious based, because it wasn't. Because when you were children, you don't think like that. You don't think, well, I'm going to the church. You just your mates.
Yeah, you're just
going out with your
out,
mates to go skateboarding. It's not nothing like that. I think that religion and different thoughts, beliefs, and the way that you believe in your maker or a God or whatever it might be, I think you should be free to believe in whatever you want to believe in.
Yeah.
But I do think that you can be religious without being religious. So the spirituality of someone, your spirituality, I mean, I think there's something more out there than was just us. When I look at the stars, and I look at the planets, and I look at space, I immediately think, well, that's a lot of nothing out there for it to be nothing.
Yeah.
And all this is made just through, it happened because it was like, it just happened. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I start to question that, and I never want to kind of pigeonhole myself into anything. I'm always willing to read stuff and learn new things, come up with new ideas. But I do think that it's a slippery slope where you can become so devout to something that you become blinkered and you don't look to anything else, and you don't want to hear about anything else. And that,
completely, yeah.
Where you get fanatical about something, where you just, that is it, that is your life, that thing in that bubble is your life and nothing else.
Yeah.
It's nothing else, And so when I got older, and of course friends grow up and they have families and they do their stuff, and you have more time to sort of reflect, and I look upon, what is a God, or where is a God, or how is a God. I think that everyone, in a way, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, I suppose, everyone in a way is, in a small part, their own God.
Oh, yeah.
and their own maker of their destiny. And I think that with all the craziness that goes on in the world, and all the craziness that is happening in the world, and all the craziness that has been happening in the world and has happened for millennia,
yeah,
I think that we kind of lose our way a little bit, and we're going off track a little bit when it comes to the unknown, the paranormal. If you could imagine, put it this way, if you got all of the most cleverest people on the planet and put them together and said, we need to find out, we need to research the paranormal. And for all I know, this might be going on right now, and it has gone on. I mean, military have conducted stuff and things like that, and done all these kind of paranormal exercises, where remote viewing and stuff like that. So it does go on, and it has happened. But I think that when we come to this kind of understanding the paranormal, it's on a hamster wheel, isn't it? We're going around and around and around, and we go full circle. And it starts again. It kind of resets and starts again.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that, I mean, I go off on a tangent and I go off waffling, but I think that when we look at religion and all the things that are in our world today, I think that we have to be a little bit more understanding of other people and how other people feel and other people's beliefs and thoughts that aren't what I would call mainstream.
Yeah, I mean,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not against any people's belief systems. The people I'm against is the people who, like you've just said, if someone is an ardent atheist and they can see no other sides, and if somebody's an ardent religious fanatic and they can see no other sides, I always get into kind of not arguments, but I really frustrate one of my friends because they're like, "Do you still see yourself as a Roman Catholic?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And like, "But do you believe in the Bible?" I'm like, "No, not really." I said, "Well, how can you? That doesn't compute. You can't have one and the other." I'm like, "Well, I can. Yeah. I've allowed myself to say that I can." Do you know what I mean? It's because I don't know. I don't know. And the thing is, they don't know. Atheists don't know. And religious people don't know. So you would say, okay, therefore you're agnostic. And no, I still count myself as that as Roman Catholic, because why not? Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to, it doesn't cause anyone any harm for me to think so. And nobody knows. That's the thing. That's the key thing. And nobody will know. That's the other thing, because everyone says you'll know when you die. Well, not according to an atheist, because there's nothing there. So it's good to theorize. It's good to debate. It's good to have your own ideas on what goes on. But the moment you start trying to force them down other people's neck and tell them they're in the wrong, you don't know. So there's no point doing it.
Yeah, you can soon go down a dark path when you start to try and do that. Nicely moving on from religion and the paranormal, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot and aliens? Maybe the Bigfoot stroke alien connection, because that is a topic apparently.
Yeah.
Are aliens Bigfoot wearing big furry coats?
Yes, they are, and I've got proof because I've got one in the garage. No, do you know what? To be honest, I listened to. There's a fantastic show out there, Into the Fray, done by Shannon LeGros, and it's largely Bigfoot focused. And I'll be honest, it's not my favorite topic, Bigfoot, but I'm still fascinated with it. And cryptids in general, the thing is, I think why it's a hard thing to explain, but I am interested in cryptids, Bigfoot, etc. But I think it's so likely that I put my interest into things which are less provable. And what I mean by that is obviously Bigfoot's not proven, but when you think, was it mountain gorillas were only found in 1911 or whatever it was, or sometime near there. There's been one of the world's biggest trees has only been discovered in the last 12 months over in the States, or the species of tree anyway. And I just don't see it as inconceivable or such a ridiculous idea that there's an animal that's out there that exists that we haven't found. I think it's very stupid to think otherwise. Well, not stupid's too harsh a word, but I think it's very irresponsible to think otherwise.
I do watch a lot of documentaries on Bigfoot, and I advise anyone that wants to learn more about Bigfoot is to look up Small Town Monsters on YouTube. They make some amazing documentaries.
Oh, okay.
They are really high quality. One of the things that I do notice when I watch these documentaries from researchers that go out in the field, they go out into the vast forests in America, and their national parks are immense, a little bit bigger than the Forest of Dean, but they are immense. And the researchers that have encountered these large fellas have said that they seem to come from nowhere. That they don't hear them, they don't see them arrive, they don't see them leave, and that they seem to be able to move very quickly and very precisely where they want to be.
Yeah.
One lady who witnessed a large hairy beast from her window. She lived out in the middle of nowhere. She was surrounded by a huge forest. It's in America.
Yeah.
And she witnessed a large figure, at least 7 foot tall, and it bounded from the edge of a field, maybe a couple of 100 feet into the woodland, the edging of the woods. And she said that he did it in about 6 to 7 steps. So that's powerful. That's literally, that's literally jumping across, and that's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have noticed in reading about, because we have them in England with people that have seen what we call them the wild man over here. And obviously you've got the abominable snowman up in the snowy areas.
I believe we go camping to a place in North Wales called Llyn-Gwynant, just at the foot of Snowdon, and that's got an alleged Bigfoot or wild man, apparently. Never seen it, obviously, but
they're all over. These accounts are all over, but obviously predominantly in places like America, because America have got vast areas of wilderness, and of course, other phenomenon that happen not just in America but all over, where people just vanish into thin air. But that's a story for another day. That's a whole can of worms there.
Yeah.
But one thing I was going to say was that when you do read about some Bigfoot sightings, is they always seem to coincide. Not all of them, but some of them seem to coincide with alien sightings.
Yeah, lights in
unidentified
the sky.
Lights in the sky. Where people will see these lights in the sky a few nights before or a few nights after, and then they will have the phenomenon where they'll see what perceived to be Bigfoot or a large hairy bipedal person or thing, because we don't know. But obviously one of the most famous is, obviously we've got the Patterson film and that, but coming a bit more up to date is Skinwalker Ranch. And the big alleged type Bigfoot that was witnessed coming out of what they only describe as a portal that seemed to open up in a field, and this large creature walked out and just casually strolled off across the field, and the portal closed, and they went in searching for it. They couldn't find any trace of it anywhere. And of course there were other phenomenon on Skinwalker where they had a large, this is when the family lived there, because obviously it got too much for the family that originally lived on the ranch. They sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow, who put NIDS in there, which is the National Institute for Discovery Science. And he set up a camp there to measure and document this phenomenon. But the family were plagued for a while by what they describe as large, heavy creatures walking around outside the ranch, moving around on the wood area, outside the door and stuff. They were also plagued with what you could describe as poltergeist phenomenon in the building, which has got a connection I'll come to in a second with poltergeist phenomenon and aliens. But the most scary thing is that they encountered a large, oversized, wolf-like dog, which came up to them, and then it turned. I think it turned violent, and they shot at it with a very high-powered rifle, and it didn't seem to do anything to it. So all this strange phenomenon. Of course, when I talk about poltergeist phenomenon, if we think about Whitley Strieber and his cabin up in the woods, when he had his, whatever it was he was experiencing, his communion, he experienced poltergeist phenomenon in his cabin, and it was not only witnessed by himself, it was witnessed by people who came to stay in the cabin as well, where they felt that they were being watched and that things were moving around in the cabin and being misplaced.
Yeah.
And it maybe, always goes back to sort of aliens in invisible suits.
But yeah, I know that one of the things from the Bigelow Ranch, Skinwalker Ranch even, that they reported as well was kind of like invisible sort of, I don't know what the right word is. Objects is the wrong word, but invisible things that were given off like higher magnetic fields. That they could like locate them, like there was something there that was emitting a magnetic field. And I think if you've seen on like YouTube and the likes, I think it's called the Hutchinson effect, maybe, where they've managed to replicate poltergeist phenomena using the high-powered magnets or creating a magnetic field. It's a highly controversial thing, but using mega-powered magnets, they've managed to make things jump off a table and stuff. And it's just interesting that that's one of the phenomena that's being reported at Skinwalker Ranch as well, the high magnetic fields. Just seemingly, because I tying into UFOs, I think this, like the propulsion systems of UFOs and the like, I think that's what in 1,000 years' time, or whenever we find how we can do a similar thing, because nobody knows with UFOs. We use the term I use the term very non-descriptively, because I'm completely open to the idea that it might be us from the future coming back. Tying in there with let's say, for example, because none of us know, and this is the thing, we can only look at what the patterns are and then make an assumption. So you could also argue there when we're talking about like Bigfoot are sighted around the times of UFOs, who's to say what's the causal effect there? Let's say our cat, the neighbor's cat, for example, I can look at her in one room, blink an eye, with sight unseen and no sound, she can be upstairs. Now, because I haven't perceived her doing that, didn't hear it, doesn't mean she's magically appeared there. It just means as part of her natural stealth enables her to do that. Perhaps Bigfoot has the same ability to do that. And let's say, for example, who's to say that the aliens aren't just as fascinated with Bigfoot as we are, but they've managed to sort out the moving patterns of Bigfoot, or when they come out, they know by star alignments or whichever else when they're likely to catch a Bigfoot. Therefore, they come out to Bigfoot watch, and they're out 3 days before a Bigfoot sighting because they're in the area thinking we might see a Bigfoot. So, do you know what I mean? We just don't know. We can only throw theories at it. Do I think Bigfoot are aliens? No, I don't. And the reason, I'm not saying that there's a difference between. Sorry, when I say they're not aliens, I mean that very simple thing. I don't think they're the lights in the sky. They land and they are the Bigfoot coming out. I do think there's a chance they're like a spiritual entity. So maybe like a natural force basically personified. So like a forest spirit or something like that. Yeah. I think there's a chance that they're that, but I don't think that they're the intelligent species which are flying what we're now terming UAPs in the sky, personally. But I'm not, they might be. We don't know, is the thing.
So staying on the subject of UFOs, have you ever experienced a UFO or seen anything strange in the night sky?
Yes, actually. I've there's two that jump out. One when I was very young, sat on a shed roof. Middle of the day, it was the afternoon, actually, but it was bright, summer's day, and a giant orange fireball slowly fell down in the sky. And it wasn't a Chinese lantern, because this was like the size of a football. And it wasn't the sun, but it very slowly moved down across the sky and then went past the horizon. No idea what it was. The second one is with a pair of binoculars. Becca's stepdad's got these amazing binoculars. They're like Swarovski crystal binoculars or something, which is to do with the lens. They're about like $2,000 or something ridiculous for a pair of binoculars, because he's a keen bird watcher. And he was showing me these binoculars in the back garden. And it was one of those daytimes where you can see the moon during the day. It's like a silhouetted thing. And I went, oh, I'll look at the moon. So I focused in on the moon, and a silver small, it looked like a subtraction sign on a keyboard. It is the only way to describe it, because it wasn't exactly like cigar shaped. It was more like a perfect rectangle. Went behind the moon and didn't come out the other side. So yeah, they're two things that could have completely rational explanations. Could just be a satellite. Could be something else. The first one, I don't know. Definitely strange. So yeah,
certainly strange.
I've seen what we would, in the very definition of the word, a non-identified flying object. Then yes, I've seen a couple, but I couldn't tell you what they were.
Interesting that you bring in the moon, because my flip side question to that was, do you think that there are bases on the moon, and do you think that sooner or later we are going to, someone's going to admit that there is a past civilization that used to live on Mars? Because there are so many people now that are coming out and doing research, looking at pictures that are coming back from Mars and scratching their heads and asking questions that NASA will sooner or later turn around and go, well, you know what? We have been telling a little bit of a lie.
Yeah, I would say, well, the one thing I would say is that we will always, us mere plebs, the general public, we will only know 50%, if that, of what's actually known, because they won't divulge it to us. I would say bases on the moon, in my opinion, no. I don't think so on the moon. Past civilization on Mars, in my opinion, yes. I think as a species, we're very up our own backside, and we're very self-absorbed, and we're very naive, and we believe we're the only thing that exists. And that attitude is why topics like the ones we discuss on our podcasts and other things like that are just laughed off by people, because we regard our own self-importance far too highly, I think. And I do think that there has been a previous civilization on Mars. And that's the thing, isn't it? The kind of like one of the key theory about how life started on Earth is the idea that we were seeded from a meteorite, bacteria of some sort landed in a meteorite and then evolved into us. But the vast majority of people would then just like, that's come from somewhere, that living life has come from somewhere and traveled on a rock. So that, in answer to that question, is the life out there? Yes, because it arrived here, and that's what we are. So life on Mars, yeah, I do actually think. I think it was there, and it was a flourishing society, in all honesty. And then the atmosphere went, and there was some sort of seeding program that went on with Earth. It took off. I know I've got nothing other than that to say, nothing to back it up. But I just do believe that when you look, especially when scientists have come out and said this is what Mars looked like millions of years ago, and it's got an atmosphere, it's got land, it's got rivers, it's been water, it's been long said the only thing you need for life is oxygen and water, or carbon and water, and apparently they had it in abundance. So therefore, it must have had life. And again, I just think it's our naivety which makes us assume that it literally went cavemen, us, nothing else has ever existed. I think that's a bit naive.
It leads me on to something that I give a lot of thought to, and it's been in the news a lot recently, and that is disclosure. Everyone's talking about it. All the UFO heads are talking about it. All the UFO groups are talking about it. Of course, the governments, or mainly the American government, have admitted to some of the film that they have captured. They can't explain what the phenomenon is that they've captured and they've recorded. Do you think disclosure is something that's going to happen? And is it going to happen in our lifetime? And would it be, personally, just to get my 2 cents in a moment, I don't think it's going to happen. The reasons it won't happen is because the powers that be won't let it happen. But I also think that if it did happen, it would be positive and a negative thing. What do you think?
It's a tough one, really. Part of me wants to say it's already happened. And the only reason I say that is because, well, you like I will remember like early 90s and when mid 90s, even when X-Files and stuff come out. Yeah. And, they were still, if you think about it, they were still denying the existence of Area 51 at the time. And it was laughable to assume we would ever get to a point where the Pentagon would say there's something in the sky and we don't know what it is. It was laughable that would ever be admitted. And now we're in a situation where I know Area 51 could just be testing military equipment. It might not have anything to do with the whole backstory. But it's interesting that we are now living in a time where the Department of Defense are saying there are things within our airspace that we don't know what they are, but we don't believe they pose a threat. I just find that mind-blowing. So part of me would also say things don't happen. I don't think things happen accidentally. I don't think they'd give us that snippet of information if they didn't know something else. So I don't know what that is, but I do believe they would try anything. I think governments will try anything and everything to keep you in the dark when they want to keep you in the dark. And part of me would go as far as to say, when you hear about, like, part of me, as stupid as it is, when they were talking about lockdowns for COVID, obviously COVID, as you know personally, is a horrific thing that did take place. But when the lockdown stay indoors was taking place, part of me was thinking, I wonder if this could just be because there's going to be a giant fleet of UFOs going over, and they're like, don't go outside,
I thought that as well. I thought, what's going on? Is this the mass landings? Is it going to be like V? Are they going to appear in the sky?
And I think that the governments would try and do something like that. They'd knock out communications or something and say, oh, it's just it's a solar flare or something. So there could be no sharing of social media. There could be no nothing. I think they're the flags that you'd have to look for. And I don't think, I'm not saying, I could probably say stuff that would make me sound like a right weirdo. But what I mean is, I don't think it would be as black and white as tomorrow there's going to be aliens flying over. Just be aware.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to convey. It's like disclosure in the sense of, oh, by the way, on tonight's news, this is Jim the alien, and he's going to have a chat. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think that if we do have any form of disclosure, it's going to be done in such a way that it's going to be so carefully controlled. And that their powers that be will be very careful as to what is let out and what people. I mean, there is film out there, and they say that they don't know what it is, but they're not saying, well, it's an alien spaceship.
Exactly. They're just saying,
we don't know what it is. So you decide what it is. Everyone jumps on it and says, well, it's the Tic Tac, it's a UFO, it's going really fast.
Yeah.
They decided what it is, and we still don't know what it is. I think that with UFOs, with any phenomenon that is up there in the sky that shouldn't be there, it needs investigating, obviously, and people are out there doing it, but resources are limited. And there are some really good researchers out there, but there are also some other researchers that are doing it for the other reasons, but there are some really good ones. And I think that those people out there, there's not enough of them, and the scientists that have got the facilities and the backing and the funding, they don't want to go near it because their career is on the line. And although 20, 30 years ago, if you were a scientist and you came out and said, I want to research UFOs, I'm going to join this group, that was your career. You're done. Your career's over. You're done, mate. No, you will never get any more funding. Now I think it's a little bit more accepted, where it's in the kind of the public domain. The UFOs are kind of a little bit like pop culture, where you say to somebody, oh, are you into UFOs? And they don't immediately think you're some weird geek that lives in a basement. They think, oh, this is somebody that, wants to expand and learn about new things. But there's still that kind of, you've obviously experienced this when you go into a place where you don't know anyone, and they go, so what? And you say, oh, I do a podcast, or I'm into ghosts or whatever. And they look at you and you get that look, Oh, that's like, you're looking at you like you're some sort of, like you're 100 foot tall.
I think that in terms of the disclosure part, I think you're right in terms of, I think what they will do, they'll release bits drip by drip, and there will be no massive effect. And kind of what I mean by that on a tangible, provable scale is, I do think it's fascinating that if I could go back in time and say to 16-year-old me, do you know in 2022 the US Department of Defense will say there's things in the sky, they don't know what they are, and there is people catching footage of it. That would blow my mind. But my skeptical friend, for example, his attitude in 1996 of it's all nonsense, doesn't exist, don't be daft. I asked him about this very same subject and said very recently, the government body of defense in America is saying these things exist in the sky and they don't know what they are. And his response was exactly the same. He went, yeah, and they're right to say that, but it doesn't matter because UFOs don't exist. And I found it fascinating that they've managed to release this in such a way that it's not changed a lot of people's minds or blown a lot of people's minds that this has been outed.
Yeah, it's a kind of a drip feed. It's I mean, we know the media run, let's be honest, that the way the media is set up, it kind of dictates to everyone how to think. Most people, thought processes are based on what they see and what they hear. And what they see and what they hear is what they read or what they see on the news. So the news dictates to you how you think. And when I do talk to people in a sense of, when it comes to the UFO phenomenon, and I say, well, you've got to remember that a lot of, if you're only watching the news or reading newspapers from the main media, in a way you're being programmed to interpret certain information a certain way. It's only when you push all that aside and stop watching that and go into the more, what I would call it, the independent fringe media. Okay, that is a massive quagmire in itself, because even on YouTube, you type in UFOs and there's so much stuff that is literally just noise. And you've got a small percentage of people that are what I would call quality researchers that do their due diligence and they put stuff out there. And when you hear what they present, you think, my God, that is some interesting stuff. At the end of the day, I think that if we do have a form of disclosure, and if they did turn around and say, look, the aliens are here and they're going to build a house or whatever, or they're going to make a church, wouldn't that be weird? The Church of Alien. If they were going to do something and they landed, or they admit that they've been around forever, it's going to change the way that we view ourselves and our position, because we would no longer be the alpha dog. We would be the underdog, because they would be the, they've landed in their spaceships. We are no longer, and you're also going to get people who are going to turn them into a form of deity.
Yeah, completely, yeah.
And they're going to see them as a god and worship them as a god. And of course, when people get into that, what we talked about earlier, fandom and fanatical kind of mindset, you then have the possibility for violence to occur, because people want, you believe in this or you believe in nothing. And if you don't believe in this, then you must perish.
Yeah.
So we come kind of full circle there, when it's a very, very tricky tightrope to kind of walk when we look at the whole alien phenomenon. It's not a question of just someone landing and coming out of a spaceship and going, oh, hi. Yeah. I'm an alien. I'm from wherever. It's so much more complicated, because we are very, well, not all. In general, I think we are always looking for someone or something to show us the way.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
to show us that path. And the aliens are kind of that. It's like the afterlife. We're hoping for something at the end. I mean, I love ghosts. I love the paranormal. I love reading about it. I love all the cases I cover and read about. But I'm still not convinced. I'm still always a little bit on that fence, thinking, well, you've got to be, because otherwise, if you fall into the kind of, well, it is true, and you might as well just not read anything ever again. Just believe.
Yeah. Also, it'd drive you mad as well if you believed everything.
It would. So, okay, so fantastic. I think for this episode we've covered every topic on the planet.
Almost, yeah, almost.
Nearly. So all I've got to ask you is, where's your podcast going in 2022? What's your kind of goal for this year, and where do you see yourself at, the other side of the summer?
Well, just stability, really, for we need to talk about ghosts. So yeah, that's it really. I stopped doing it in November, as I say, because it lost its way and I wasn't enjoying doing it. And that was the key thing. And I thought, I love the paranormal, and it's what I do in my spare time. I did have a full-time job. I've now managed to go part-time, thankfully. But in my spare time away from work, I read the paranormal, I watched the paranormal, and it was a hobby, and it was a fun hobby that I enjoyed doing. And when I lost the passion to do it, and it felt like something I had to get out each and every week, as opposed to wanted to get out each and every week, that's when I realized something was wrong with it. So I stopped it. And 19 episodes into the reformat, I'm still enjoying it. And I kind of just want to make sure it stays on that trajectory, really.
You got to find your kind of the vibe that fits with what you want to do. I think with anything in life, I mean, I talk as well as someone who produces these shows. I always want to do stuff that I find interesting. I want to do an episode that I want to be interested in, because it's very difficult to do something that, it's that whole kind of 9 to 5 mentality where you're doing something you absolutely hate, but you know you've got to do it. It's nothing worse than that, and it's kind of torture. I want my listeners, for like Paratalk, I want my listeners to get an episode and they get a little bit of everything that they want. And I also want everyone that listens to the show to get the show that they want. So I understand where you're coming from, and it's very difficult to do it sometimes, but having a kind of an idea of where you're going makes life so much easier when you do these shows. If you've got that kind of, that map in your head, thinking, I need to do this and go in this direction. Because you can end up going in circles and do it and falling into a trap where you're doing the same thing over and over and just getting worse and spiraling out of control.
I mean, I'm like, luckily, like we were talking earlier, and just like to kind of round it all off, the forcing it into a format for me helps. I know it can be constrictive to some people, but forcing it into a format where I have, okay, there's an intro, then I do a review of something, then we have ghost stories, then I go to Becca's piece. Forcing it into that thing and trying to get that into 30 minutes and giving myself those guidelines has worked for me. So, for example, today started recording an episode from nothing about 11:30, and by 2:00 it was finished, edited, and getting uploaded. And that was only because I'd got those guidelines in place now. Whereas previously it'd be a 6-hour endeavor, loads of re-records, loads of me messing stuff up because I just wasn't in it. So
I would advise any of my listeners to go check out Kevin's podcast, because it is a good podcast. And if you like this show, you'll like his show. I think we've reached the end. It's great having you on, Kevin. I'm sure you'll be back.
Thank you very much, Reeve. No, as I say, I was a huge fan of you of the previous incarnation of the show. I wasn't even aware that it was still going, as I said to you at the start. So now I've got a bit of a back catalogue to catch up with. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for having me on.
That's all right. You're welcome, Kevin. Anyway, guys, it's end of another show. I'll be back soon. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.